RPG Heroes, a podcast where every other week I speak to a true hero in the realm of role-playing games about their journey, their craft, and their views. As your host, I will focus on one particular aspect of this wonderful hobby for the interview, regale you with stories from my own 25 years of experience with role-playing games, and reflect on the major takeaways from the interview. Join me now on this epic journey and awaken the hero in you. Welcome to episode 19 of RPG Heroes podcast. Today's episode is all about the Swedish RPG scene, which is interesting and much bigger than I expected. And to help me with this topic, I've spoken to Andreas Lundström. He's one of Sweden's most experienced game masters and RPG podcasters. But first, so in the last episode, I spoke about the 3,000 downloads, and yes, we have actually gone over that quite a bit now. And, well, that really pleases me, of course. The episode before this, episode 18, was very, very popular, and I'm glad to say that a lot of people downloaded it and, well, hopefully also listened to it. So that's really great. And to celebrate 3,000 downloads, I've arranged a little gift for all of you who listen to these episodes early on, because it is a gift that lasts for a week after I release this episode. Now, of course, I'm not going to give you that right away. You're going to have to listen to the episode, and towards the end somewhere, I'll give you the gift. Also related to last episode, I had forgot to mention a wonderful Kickstarter by Grinning Frog, which was very, very topical for that episode, which is a Kickstarter about a book, How to Become a Magical Games Master. And of course, that's really cool, but sadly, that Kickstarter is now over. I did put a link in the show notes before, but hopefully there'll be a way to get your hands on this book after the fact. So I'll keep you updated on that. So sorry, Grinning Frog, but here's your mention a bit late, but there it is. Another interesting thing to mention is that since we're talking about Sweden and the Swedish RPG scene, I just got word that Free League, which is a huge Swedish RPG company, have created their own official Twitch channel, and well, that's cool, but what's even cooler is you can sign up to be a GM or a player on that channel. So if you like Swedish RPGs or you would like to give them a go and at the same time get some online exposure as an RPG player or GM, then, well, I'll put a link in the show notes as usual. All right, well, I guess that's kind of a segue into the topic of today. So the Swedish RPG scene, why make a whole episode on just that? Because I'm sure there's also a Belgian RPG scene or a Luxembourgian, is that even a word, RPG scene? Why Sweden? Well, for me personally, it started with the fact that I became aware of this company from Sweden called Free League, or in their own language, Fria Ligan, and their games, and I got very excited about this whole new format and this new kind of atmosphere in games that I hadn't really seen elsewhere, because most of the RPGs on my shelf are from the United States, and there's nothing wrong with that, obviously, and a lot of RPGs come from the United States, but there are European RPGs, and well, since I'm European, I figured it could be an interesting topic to talk about. And it turns out that the Swedish RPG scene is the biggest in the world if you look at it per capita, which is just amazing to me. So Sweden is a real role-playing country. And in fact, when I was still quite active in live action role-playing or LARPing, I had also come across a term of Nordic LARPing. So apparently Scandinavians, they have a kind of a different approach to live action role-playing, but also, as we'll find out, role-playing games at the tabletop. Now, I won't go into the whole history of the Swedish RPG scene or now start listing companies and games, etc. In fact, part of the history is covered in the interview, which will come up in a few minutes. And from my limited research, what I would say sets apart the Swedish RPGs, at least the ones that I've purchased recently, is they tend to go more towards the gritty grim, dark end of the spectrum of role-playing games, which for me feels like coming home. I really love that type of role-playing, but I also realize it's not for everyone. And it's interesting to look at the differences between the Swedish games and the maybe for most people more familiar American games. Now, of course, it's not to say that there are no American RPGs that are gritty or grim or realistic or anything like that. Not at all. But it is something that I noticed and I found interesting. Another thing, of course, that matters when it comes to role-playing games in the international scene, especially given the fact that my podcast is in English, we're probably looking for games in English, right? So I'm sure there are RPGs from all kinds of countries in all sorts of languages that I've never heard of simply because I do not know the language and those games maybe haven't been translated. Whereas there are quite a few Swedish RPGs that have been translated into English very successfully and being sold internationally. So that also makes it really cool. The only other RPG from a different language that seems to have gotten quite successful in English as well would be The Dark Eye, which is originally a German RPG called Das Schwarze Auge. But, this episode is about Sweden, so sorry, Germany. So without further ado, let's dive into this Swedish RPG scene together with our RPG hero. So welcome to the show, Andreas Lundström, one of Sweden's most experienced game masters and RPG podcasters. He is the host and game master of the Sweden Rolls Actual Play podcast and the creator of all the music played in Sweden Rolls. Andreas showcases the rich tradition of role-playing from Sweden and teaches a group of professional actors how to play these games in the process. He has created music for Free League to promote their games, and, as I said, uses this music in his own podcast to great effect. In between episodes, he finds time to interview Sweden's greatest RPG creators, saving me some time. So, all I can say is, välkommen till podcasten, Andreas.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
So, Sweden Rolls, yeah. Swedish RPGs. I'm very curious. I've been reading a lot about Swedish RPGs. I own a few of them now. In your eyes, what makes Swedish RPGs different from other ones?
I could answer that with such a long answer, going back to the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm going to try and keep it short. I think availability nowadays is kind of a big thing with the Swedish RPGs. They all tend to try and keep a high level of availability.
Yeah.
Both the Free League games and the Helmgast games and the Oskfogen games, it's a high level of availability.
Yeah.
It's a low threshold to get started.
Okay. Oh, in that sense. Yeah. So
that's one thing, but it's not typical for Swedish RPGs only, but that's like a common thing.
Yeah.
Often.
And Sweden has a long history of role playing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Yeah.
And how did all that get started? Like, where did it start bubbling up?
It started with something called the first GothCon, which is the biggest convention in Sweden. That was 1977. I don't think it was even called GothCon then. But I've interviewed several people who were there because they were only like 30 people, but many of them became major players within the Swedish RPG scene later on. So back then, a guy called Mikael Börjesson, I think, he brought a D&D copy from the States.
Yeah.
And they were playing like war games. Strategy war games, basically board games. And they met up and this guy just brings out this box like, hey guys, I brought this. Maybe we should try this.
Yeah.
And several of the biggest names with the Swedish RPG community were at that table and played that game at that time. So, but it took about 5 years for a company to start forming and some original material being released. And the major Swedish RPG, Drakar och Demoner, which is Dragons and Demons, like directly translated, came out in 1982, the first edition.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, what was the question?
The question is where did all this start?
Okay. But then I answered the question.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. And what about you? Where did you get involved in role-playing games?
I came in a bit later. For one reason, I was just a few years too young to be there at the beginning because I'm born in '78. So by the time that I was coming of age to start joining games, many of the other people had already started. So I had some friends who played AD&D. This would be like maybe 88, 89, 90 maybe.
Yeah.
And I hadn't read Tolkien yet, but I had played a board game called Drakskatt and Dragon Treasure, which was basically a dungeon crawl. You go from room to room trying to slay different monsters. And I just thought this was the coolest thing ever. And I always liked stories and fairy tales and tales about knights and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I begged them, please, can I join your game?
Yeah.
And they were like, no.
Really?
I got kind of the same answer that many, like when I talk to female players or who tried to start with role-playing games in the 80s. When they met with some guys and they were like, yeah, can I join your game? And they were like, no.
Oh, really?
I got kind of the same reaction from my friends, and these were like my classmates.
Yeah.
They were like, no, we started a campaign. You can't join.
Oh, it's like a secret little cult.
Yeah, and this made it even more exciting because I bought a book. I bought the Barbarian's Guide to the AD&D second edition.
Yeah.
And I looked at the pictures and I didn't understand anything, but it was for me, it was just so alluring. I was like, I need to play this. And then when I started high school, what we in Sweden call gymnasiet, about 16 years of age, I for some reason, some coincidence, I came in the same class as a guy who had an old group they'd been playing for 7-8 years. And we became best friends, basically. And he was like, yeah, you should join our group. So we started playing Drakar och Demoner. And we were playing different games. We were playing the original Cult. We were playing the Swedish translation of the MERP, Middle-earth role-playing game. We were playing Mutant, the original version of that, and Mutant, Space Mutant, and stuff like that. And we were playing different games, and all the same guy was a game master all the time. And when we played some MERP, he was like, and I had only been playing role-playing games for maybe 2 months or something. And he came up to me. We were playing several times a week. And he came up to me and he said, listen, I want you to GM Lord of the Rings, this MERP game.
Oh.
And I was like, but you guys been playing for like 7 years. I've played for 2 months. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, for two reasons. For one, I'm tired of being the GM all the time. I want to play. I want to be a character.
Yeah.
And I'm so sick and tired of you slapping me on the wrist with the Tolkien lore all the time.
Oh.
I can't write a scenario without you like, well, actually, all the time. So that was the beginning, like this would be 1994, fall of 1994. Yeah, that's when I started both playing and GMing.
Yeah, and so the games you're playing at the time, apart from Cult then, so you played Drakar and Demoner and Cult, those are both Swedish, right?
Yeah, and Mutant as well.
Yeah. Okay, so mostly Swedish games already. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then all the books would be in Swedish, I suppose.
Yeah, they were in Swedish, absolutely. Because what was a bit different with the Swedish RPG scene than the international RPG scene was that the kids were the ones who were playing it.
Yeah.
I mean, as far down to like maybe 8 years of age.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so kids from like 9 to 14, in the mid 80s, they were the ones playing, and everyone was playing. I like so many people. Yeah. I heard tales from the guys at Target Games, the company who published it, that it was actually apart from Dungeons and Dragons, Drakar och Demoner for a year or two was the most sold RPG in the world.
That's crazy.
And remember, this game was not translated.
Yeah.
This was from a Swedish market only.
Yeah.
And by that time, we had maybe 7 million inhabitants.
That's nuts. Wow. So it was like a mainstream thing, I guess. Or
it was in every home there was a Drakar and Demoner box, basically. Except mine.
Oh.
Because I didn't have anyone to play with.
Oh, unlucky. Yeah. Wow, that's nuts. Because I mean, like here, I find, I got into it, into role playing games in secondary school. I think I was about 15 or so. And everything, all the books were in English. There were no Dutch role playing games at the time. It didn't exist. And I think for several reasons. One is that our language is not suited for it. Like, I don't know how it is in Swedish, so I'll ask you in a minute. But like it, for me, as a non-native speaker, it sounds cool when somebody says in English, "I draw my sword," and then if I say it in Dutch, it just sounds dumb. Like it doesn't create this image in my head. How is that in Swedish? Does it sound cool to say I draw my sword in Swedish?
Yeah, actually, I draw my sword. That you can make that sound kind of cool. Yeah, but a lot of other stuff is really. I mean, you've seen so many Hollywood movies and these classic cult '80s fantasy movies. So a lot of the cool lines you want to say are in English, of course.
Yeah.
But in Sweden, it's kind of. We kind of tend to lean more towards the low fantasy, which means that everything doesn't have to be epic.
Yeah,
we go more into the gritty and the low fantasy kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be that cool all the time.
Yeah, and that helps, I guess. Yeah,
that helps. I think. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Because the first game I ever played was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Second Edition, the one you mentioned, and that's I think grittier in a way than maybe Fifth Edition now would be, but still it's a high fantasy game. Yeah. So why do you think that is? That in Sweden most people tend to kind of lean towards the low fantasy, gritty kind of stuff?
Ooh, I don't know. Harsh Swedish realism, maybe. I don't know. It's hard to say why we would lean towards that. There's a large like narrative culture in Sweden that like these. I mean, many of our most successful writers, authors. Wrote very realistic books, so that could be one reason, maybe.
Yeah, so
that kind of one reason.
So the literary culture of Sweden is one of realism and grittiness, and
I'd say, without ever having thought about it, I'm just shooting wildly from the hip here.
Yeah.
But
okay, yeah,
maybe.
Well, I mean, it's your take on it. It doesn't have to.
Let's say that. That's my take on it.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay.
But I mean, the success of Drakar and Demoner in the 80s is what's laid the grounds now for Sweden being the biggest role-playing nation in the world per capita. If you count per capita, there are more RPG companies, publishers, there are more books sold, there are more players, there are more podcasts, like whatever, you name it.
Yeah.
I would dare to say that per capita we are the biggest role-playing nation in the world.
Yeah, sure. That's wonderful. So if I ever move to Sweden, I'll have no trouble finding some friends to play a game.
No, for sure. No,
because there are plenty of countries out there where if you play a role-playing game, you're kind of on your own.
Yeah. Of course, I read all the time on Facebook, like, I can't find a group to play with. But I'd say it's more of a scheduling thing.
Yeah,
people being so busy rather than I can't find anyone who play role-playing games. That is not a problem here.
No, exactly.
Especially with this new this second wave of role-playing games, which is an international thing, of course, but it's also in Sweden a huge second wave. We're talking about the second gold wave of RPGs in Sweden.
Yeah, and I suppose you play your own role in that, right? And what I found interesting, the way I found your podcast originally is that I got interested in games by Free League and, or I guess I should say Fria Ligan. And, I thought, okay, well, it looks interesting, but I don't know. So usually what I do is I look for actual play to get some examples. And then I found your podcast. I thought, okay, well, let's have a listen. Why not? And then, of course, I got hooked. Yeah. So what is your link to Free League? Like how did you get the podcast off the ground so quickly?
Well, the thing is that I had a Swedish language podcast before, which is actually rebranding into an all English podcast.
Oh.
But it's called Tärningen är kastad, which is in Swedish for Alia jacta est, the die is cast.
Ah, okay.
The famous quote.
Yeah.
And we played the One Ring, and we played some other stuff, and we played some Coriolis. And we played Coriolis. We wanted a prize. We wanted to give out a Coriolis box for a listener.
Yeah.
So we had a competition, and I contacted the Free League, and they were like, "Yeah, sure, of course, we'll give you a box to give out."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, awesome! That's nice." I think I had originally asked for like a dice set or maybe a GM screen, something like that.
Something
I'm like,
small.
No, you're getting the boxed set. I'm like, okay, thanks.
Nice, yeah.
So we got a good connection there, and then when we started Sweden Rolls, me and Jacob, who are the executive producers of the show, we were discussing like what we're going to play. Do we want to go into the Dungeons and Dragons jungle of tens of thousands of podcasts? Do we want to do something else? And we were like, well, we're Swedish. Let's just do that. Let that be our thing. Like we play mostly Swedish RPGs that are published in English, and of course, by that time, Cult was not out yet. Western is about to be published soon, and I mean, of course, also we have the Trudvang RPG. But apart from that, it's like the Free League only. Yeah. Symbarum as well, of course, but now they're Free League as well. So, But so what we did was, I knew that they were, because I was a Kickstarter backer, I think, for the first Forbidden Lands box. Yeah, I was. Yeah, so I knew that game was coming out, and we were just about to kick off the podcast, and I contacted the Free League and said, okay, listen, we're going to start a podcast. We are aiming high. We're going to try and make this into a big thing.
Yeah.
And we have professional actors. They're amazing within their respective field, within acting. And our take is going to be Swedish games. So, of course, a lot of the games we'll be playing will be your games. So I went into their office for a meeting, and we talked for a long while. I pitched them my idea for the campaign, because I always write original scenarios in campaign, because we don't want to spoil original, like the official stuff. Especially since we often play things like Forbidden Lands, A Bitter Reach, and stuff like that before it's even come out.
Yeah,
and it's even more important not to spoil it.
Yeah.
With Baldur's Gate that we're playing now, I feel like the spoiler that's over. Like if you're going to be mad at us spoiling Baldur's Gate, I mean that's on you, not us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Get your act together.
So I went into a meeting, and I pitched my campaign ideas, and they loved it. And they said, some tips for some amendments for it, So we were like, we don't have an official cooperation between Sweden Rolls, and it's just like we feel that us playing their games and them promoting us is helping us, and they feel that us playing their games promotes their games, obviously.
Yeah.
So it's not a formal cooperation. It's just like we like each other's work.
Yeah.
I remember when we had released like 5 episodes only of the first season of Forbidden Lands. I went in there for a meeting, and Christian Granat, who's a graphic designer there, he was like, I'm just waiting for the next episode. And he was like, I've tried so many actual play podcasts. I can't listen to them. It's not my thing. But I felt, since you're playing Forbidden Lands, I was going to listen to it. I'm so hooked.
Yeah.
And of course, that's really nice to hear that someone that you really admire, because I mean, how many awards have not their games won?
Yeah, exactly.
And a lot of that is Christian's work, really, with the design, which is amazing. And it was really nice to hear that. So it's but of course, I'd say for the past year, maybe, for me personally, of course, it's developed into a cooperation because of my music, because they asked me to write soundtracks.
Yeah. And did that get started because they hear your music on your podcast and like, hey?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I, as you mentioned in your intro, I write all the original music for Sweden Rolls.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, now that we're playing Baldur's Gate, we got the opportunity to get the original Michael Honig music. I don't know how to pronounce the name, but Michael Honig is what, I don't know.
Yeah.
His original music for the game. And of course, if you get the rights to use that, you have to do it, because it just puts you in there. It puts you in Candlekeep. It puts you in Beregost, Nashkel, Baldur's Gate right away. So you have to use it. So I'm mixing at this time. I'm mixing my music with the original music. But before that, I'd made all the original music, and they really liked it, and they asked me to do some soundtracks for the Bitter Reach, which is an expansion for Forbidden Lands. That was the first one.
I have it here on the bookshelf. I'm excited to start reading it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Have you gotten the soundtrack? Because that should have been sent out in like June or something.
Well, I'm not a Kickstarter backer. I just ordered the game on their website.
Okay. Then it will come on Spotify very soon. I think weeks maybe. Yeah.
Excellent. Cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what is your background? Are you a musician originally, or?
Yeah, I've been a musician semi-professionally for about 20 years now, basically. My first Irish band. Yeah, we will soon be celebrating 20 years.
Okay.
And so I play a lot of acoustic music, predominantly like medieval music. Yeah. Kind of folk. I have a German Oompa Oompa band. We play in like Oktoberfests around in Sweden. So I play the drums and sing in German at the same time.
Oh wow! Yeah, October. It's celebrated here as well. I live very close to the German border. It's wow. That's some kind of party.
It is, but sadly, in these days, like basically all of our gigs are canceled, which is very sad, because that was a huge part of my income for the last quarter of the year. Every year.
Yeah, and now well, let's hope next year everybody will be immune or something. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I have antibodies. I have confirmed antibodies, actually.
Oh, really?
Okay. Stockholm was such a hot spot because we didn't have a hard lockdown. We didn't have a lockdown at all. We just had recommendations from the officials. So like per capita, we're very high on the death rate, but we'll see if a second wave hits some of the countries who had a hard lockdown. If so, maybe we did the right choice. If not, then we for sure did the wrong choice. We'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah, there's no way of knowing, and
not yet anyway.
Without getting into it too much, I remember seeing that on the Dutch news that everybody was perplexed. What, in Sweden they're not doing anything? And then they're interviewing somebody in Sweden on having a beer somewhere, and they're like, so, "Aren't you afraid?" He's like, "No."
Tough Vikings.
Yeah, exactly. Talk about gritty.
Or stupid Vikings, maybe, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, it goes hand in hand, right?
No, but the thing is that there were so many funny memes and stuff like that about like bus stops. Like, I mean, keeping distance. That's the way we do in Sweden. If you're at a bus stop, you stand as far away from everyone as you possibly can. That's the Swedish way,
Yeah, exactly. I haven't been to Sweden that much. I've been a few times, but I was for work, and I always had to go to what's this place called now? It's at the tip of my tongue. Anyway, some tiny place somewhere right in the middle of nowhere. So whenever I went there, I was like, "There's nobody in Sweden." It feels very empty there. Yeah,
a lot of empty space. A lot of empty space for sure, especially up north.
Oh yeah. It was called Karlskoga. I don't know if you know the place, but it used to be an American some like a gun factory. I don't know. Anyway, playing role-playing games. So you've been playing a lot of Swedish role-playing games in Swedish for your other podcast. So how was it for you to transition to playing completely in English? Is it a very different experience?
Well, there are cooler lines, as you yourself pointed out earlier, which is very good for podcasts.
Yeah.
So that helps. I've been talking English, not fluently maybe, but more almost for many years. So I mean, the language barrier wasn't that hard for me. And when we started, we had an American and a Brit with us as well. So if we had any questions, we could, since it's not live streamed, we could always like, what's that word again I'm looking for? And they would just come up with it, and then we could, okay, let's back up 20 seconds, let's do a retake. So yeah, I actually got a comment from a listener and actually a game designer in Sweden who likes the way I GM and the way I play. And he was listening to my Swedish language podcast, and he was like, yeah, I really like the way you GM in Swedish, because it's quite something else. So I guess there is some difference. There's some kind of, you're somewhat limited for sure. Because the vocabulary isn't not, of course, as big in a foreign language, but it's nothing that I think about. It's nothing that I feel. I don't feel restricted by the English. It's more like I feel inspired, actually. Because it's much easier to do accents in English. If I'm going to do accents in Swedish, it very easily becomes just silly in a bad way. And I'm actually better at doing accents in English than in Swedish.
Yeah, a couple of times when I listened, I thought, have you spent some time in Ireland, perhaps? Or, because it's not just the accents. It's exactly. It's the mannerisms in the language, all the like and all that kind of stuff. I thought,
Yep. I worked behind the bar in Waterford in Ireland for a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, okay. I picked up on that all right.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
Well spotted.
Yeah. So, and now, so you're playing with, by now they're very experienced, but when you started with Sweden Rolls, your players, they had not played role-playing games before.
No.
And what's your approach to teaching a role-playing game? Of course you do it on a show, but what's your approach normally to get people kind of to understand what the game should be played like, or what it, how it works?
Yeah. Well, actually, it's not that different from like improv theater, and that's like the approach we had. Like treat this as if we were having an improv session, and now and again I will ask you to roll some dice. So in the beginning, there were very, very seldom times when they were like, can I roll for blah, blah, blah. They just told me what they wanted to do. And I was like, yeah, okay, make a roll for this. Now that they understand the way games work more, they go to like away from, because that's the way we want to do it. That's the way I want to do it in my home games as well. Don't tell me I want to roll for this. Tell me what you want to do. And I'll tell you if you can just do it, or if I want to roll, and if so, which role I want.
Yeah, keep your head in the fiction, kind of. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, and we had, we were saying like, feel free, like don't feel restrained. Like try to do whatever you want to do, and if something doesn't work, we'll just say this doesn't work, and we'll go back. We'll back up a bit, and like as I said, do a retake. There could be. We said always like if you have a joke in your head, just do it. And if it's an emotional scene, if there's a scary scene, or something like that where it doesn't really fit, then at least we'll have some fun, and then we can go back and just redo it 1 minute.
And I guess working with actors, at least there's no trouble getting people to role play.
No, exactly. That was they were into it so fast, and it was so funny, especially after that the first season of, I don't know, 15, 16 episodes of Forbidden Lands. We did it in 3 days. So we did basically
the whole
season?
First
day it took in 3 days.
Okay.
So it took and especially since like the first day we only got 3 episodes, because we had to break for rules questions, and it took a lot of time to set everything up. So I think we did like 5 or 6 episodes a day 2 and day 3.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was really intense, and when we finished the first season, everyone was very tired, because it was like 1 o'clock in the night, and it was an emotional roller coaster, and everyone was very tired and worn out. But they were like, when can we play again? When do we play next time?
Yeah.
That was their first reaction. Like when I turned off the record button, they were like, when do we play again?
That's excellent. Yeah. And I mean, you can hear it on the show, I think, that, the enthusiasm and that, they really love their characters and playing this game. It's, it's noticeable.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Because I find, depending on the group, if I'm with people who are new to role-playing games, I find it usually actually getting them to get in their role and play their character is harder than, getting them to understand you need to roll this dice, etc. Yeah.
And I always say, like, because I have a home game where we have one guy who doesn't want to like role play at all. He wants to tell the table what he wants to do, and he never uses character voices. And I'm like, that's fine.
Yeah.
Why would you have to be an actor to play role playing games? That's just silly. If you enjoy playing, do it. And some people are more forward than others. Some people are more like introverted, and that's okay. As long as the persons who are more introverted, they don't feel restrained by the people who take more space, So I often try to have a dialogue, and often I try to have all the characters involved in every scene and stuff like that. But then also to try to be attentive to, like, okay, but it doesn't seem like this player wants to have a part in this scene, then okay, that's fine.
Yeah. It's okay sometimes to just sit and watch and enjoy that if that's what you like. Yeah.
And we have one player who always has a character voice and always says everything in character. Yeah. Except if he's cracking a joke or if he's like asking a real question. And it's nice to have that mix as well. It doesn't have to be acting all the time.
No, and I think that's sometimes a misconception from people who are new to it, who have watched a show like Critical Role or listen maybe to your podcast and think, okay, I guess that's how I should do it. No, you don't have to. Yeah. No, that's good advice. Excellent.
I mean, in my opinion, it becomes more fun if you do. But I mean, there's no. I always say there's no right and wrong way of playing role-playing games. If you're having fun, that's the one and only rule. If you're having fun, you're doing it right.
Yeah, exactly. That's the trick. So I have Patreon supporters, and I always give them the opportunity. If I tell them, hey, I'm going to interview someone, and then they get a chance to ask questions via me. Great. So one of my supporters, his name is Eric Lundberg, so I guess he has some Swedish roots, even though he's in the States.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, and he asks, so he actually he plays in an actual play podcast over in the States, and his question is, what specific issues have you come across while making your actual play podcast?
Like issues in like creating the episodes, or
any kind of interesting difficulties that you came across that you thought, oh wow, I didn't expect that before I went into it.
Well, it's we talked a bit earlier before we turned on the recording button of the difference with editing when you are playing IRL and when you're playing online, because it's much easier online because we have some problems sometimes with leakage. Like my voice, I talk generally very loud, especially if there are a lot of people around. So I talk quite loud, and some other mics pick that up, and I have to. It's such a bother to edit the episodes when you play IRL. But you want to play IRL because it's much easier to get the right mood around the table. That's much harder than when you're doing it online. You're like, can I speak now? No, you okay? Okay? We talked at the same time. Okay, now go you go. No, you go.
Yeah, exactly.
It's none of that. And the mimicry. I mean, since they're actors, when they're playing their roles, they really go into characters. So we often say that for this scene we should have had a character, especially with Alira and Nissel. It's like their banter is so. There is so much going on there in the facial expressions, and it's too bad that the listeners can't see it. But I mean, I spend a lot of time editing the episodes, and just the mere thought of editing a video episode, I just go like, when we're as big as Critical Role and we have the money to hire someone to edit our stuff, then for sure, then we can do video as well.
Excellent.
I don't know if that answered his questions.
I guess so. Yeah.
What issues I found?
Yeah.
I also I'm much more of an improv GM than a prep GM, but I found that when it's supposed to be a podcast, you really need to prep a bit more.
Yeah.
So I try and make the time to try some character voices for the NPCs, which I never do in my home games. It's just like I just wing it. But yeah, I prep a bit more.
Yeah, because you're aware.
An actual play podcast.
You're not just playing a game; you're creating entertainment.
Exactly, and especially also since they're beginners, they haven't played role-playing games, so there are some tricks of the trade that I think you learn after having played for like 10 or 15 years.
Yeah,
that you don't learn after a year or two. About like puzzle solving or mystery solving, stuff like that, which is it takes a while to understand how that works in a role-playing game, I think.
And to kind of have this space in your mind, because you're so busy playing your role and understanding what is actually going on, and on top of that, to have that whole to solve a mystery. That's
exactly. So it's I need to prep a bit more for an actual play podcast than for a regular session.
Yeah. Okay.
And have the right equipment is like that's.
Oh, yeah. It makes such a difference.
Have the right. It makes such a difference, and audio quality. In Sweden, we have so many actual play podcasts that if you have a podcast with bad sound quality, people are so picky now. They're so. They won't listen to a podcast that has bad sound quality. Which has pushed us to try and have like the best sound quality in Sweden, and that puts us in the very top internationally as well. I mean, we don't record in a studio; we record in someone's home and try and do our best to for like sound, like fixing the sound, hanging up covers and all that kind of thing. So it's for not being in a studio, I think we have among the best sound quality of the actual play podcast out there.
It's excellent. Absolutely.
But I spend a lot of time with the sound, a lot of time with the editing. Never less than 8 hours per episode.
Oof. Oh, wow. Okay. I feel really lazy now. With these interviews, sometimes I cut out like some dead air or something like that. Other than that, it's just click, okay, increase the volume. Boom.
Of course. I mean, my interviews, if an interview is an hour, I maybe spend 2 hours on that. So for sure. It's much easier if it's two people, it's online. But if it's IRL and it's like me and 3-4 players, that would take about 8 hours.
Yeah, and you're breaking. Of course, it's more complicated also when you have to take breaks and stop and talk about something and then cut it out. And the rest of the podcast I recorded on my own, so that's extremely simple. If I don't like something, I just go back and do it again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about Swedish RPGs. What, in your mind, is the very best Swedish RPG? And that's a tough question because there's a lot of good ones. What's the best one?
As for now, I would say Coriolis for sure.
And what makes that the best?
The setting is just so amazing, like Arabian Nights in space. I mean, what's not to love? It's so cool. And the mythical thing with the icons and the emissaries and mythics and combining that with space, pew pew, it's just so awesome. And the Coriolis station is such an awesome place to be, and many of the planets are very cool. And I also think actually that it's the game where the Mutant Year Zero engine really, really excels. I mean, I am a fan of it, but I'm not a super fan of the rules engine. Okay. So as for now, I would say Coriolis, but I'm pretty sure in half a year I will say the One Ring, because by then it is a Swedish game, the second edition. They are taking over the second edition from Cubicle 7.
Yeah,
the One Ring has been my favorite RPG for many, many years. And when I got the news that Free League was taking over the license, I was like, all right, well, then let's see. Let's see what happens now.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think they'll do the One Ring with the Year Zero engine or?
No.
Okay.
I've talked a lot with Francesco, and they are keeping the core of the game. He is making some changes, which are for the better. I would say the big majority of changes are for the better for sure.
Okay.
If not, basically all, I think.
Yeah.
A lot of changes, and it's difficult to say if they will be big or small. But it looks. From what I heard, it's going to be really cool. And some of the few things I was not that happy about with the first edition, they're actually changing. So it's going to be a really great game.
Yeah. So can we expect episodes of Sweden Rolls with that game then in the future?
Yes, for sure. But most of all, you will be able to expect episodes from Riddles in the Dark, which is the Dice Cast podcast rebranded, because we will play the One Ring only. We will play one long campaign of just the One Ring.
Excellent. That's really cool. Yeah.
And we will alternate GMs for that. We will play a year each as a GM, and then we'll like turn over the what's it called? In Swedish we say lämna över stafettpinnen. You know when you run in the Olympics and they have a team of 4?
Oh, yeah.
And they hand the stick over to the next person who's running?
Yeah. I don't
in
know
Sweden, we have
called,
that saying that, you leave the stick for the next one.
Oh, yeah. You pass on the whatever it is that a GM
holds. Yeah, you
holds.
pass on the torch.
Oh, the torch. Yeah. That
pass
sounds
on
good,
the torch.
actually. Yeah. Pass the pint, maybe, if you're in Ireland. Sorry, Irish listeners. I'm being very insensitive. But it's true.
It's funny because it's true.
Exactly. That's how it works. Yeah. Okay. The One Ring. Looking forward to that one. Yeah. I've never played the original one, I have to say.
Oh, it's actually, I'm a huge Tolkien nerd. I discovered Tolkien when I was, about the same. Yeah, actually just 1 or 2 maybe years before I started playing Drakar and Demoner. When I started playing role-playing games. And I just fell in love instantly. And I just devoured everything I could get my hands on. And it's just, I've been a huge Tolkien fan ever since. And when I liked MERP. It wasn't a bad game. It was quite good. I enjoyed it quite a lot back in the 90s. But of course, there were a lot of things that I felt that this doesn't feel very Tolkien, you know?
Yeah.
But when I got to GM it, I could let's just not do those parts, basically.
Yeah.
And when I discovered this game, The One Ring, this was about, I would say, 4 or 5 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And I just instantly fell in. It's such a great game, and not just because it really does justice to Tolkien. Francesco Nepitello has made an awesome job of researching and really managed to if Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit were role-playing games, what would that look like, and what rules would be needed? Yeah. So it just, the whole game just oozes Tolkien all over it. It's so amazing. But it's actually a great role-playing game, like set aside the setting, because I've been guest GMing a few other podcasts in Sweden playing it, and it's they all the players are like, this is actually a really great game. We really like this rule and that rule, and I was guesting a podcast called Svartviken, which is like the Black Bay.
Okay.
Would be called, directly translated, which is one of the better Swedish language actual play podcasts out there. And as long we kept playing, we maybe did 3 or 4 episodes, a one shot, and they were like all the time, like, "Oh, this is really good. I really like this. It's such a good game."
Yeah. What's the core kind of thing that makes the game side of the game good? Like, is it?
I love the traits. You have traits which allows you to auto success stuff that aren't like super difficult.
Okay.
So if you would set, if we talk D&D terms, like everything below a DC of 15 is like, you don't roll for that.
Yeah, because you're a certain type of character. You
have the traits. You have maybe what would be a good example? You have wary as a trait. So you discovered this pickpocket in Bree who's trying to take your coin, because it's not that hard to. He's not that good. So I mean, you see it.
Yeah, because you're aware of your surroundings and your.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And they also, it's. I think the skills are good. There's a good choice of skills. They all fit in with Tolkien.
Yeah.
And in the rule book, every skill and every trait starts with a quote from the books.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
wow.
To really show you, like, when Boromir does this in this scene, this is what happens, like, rules-wise. This is what he uses. This is a skill he uses, or this is a trait that he uses.
Yeah.
So it's really, it's so connected with the original material. It's amazing.
That sounds really, really good. Gosh darn it! Now I'm going to have to look at that.
and the advancement rules are also very good. You have two different types of advancement. You have 16 common skill. No, 12. No. 6 times 3, 18. You have 18 common skills, which you get one kind of XP for. To raise, and then you have cultural virtues and cultural rewards, which is stuff and like virtues, which you use another type of XP to raise. So it's really, it's really good.
Yeah, sounds great, excellent. So one thing that you do in your interviews is towards the end of the interview, you fire off a couple of quick fire questions. So I thought I'm going to steal those and ask you.
Yeah, do that.
Turn it around. And then I'll ask my...
Are you going to use the same ones, or do you have your own ones?
No, I'm going to use yours.
Okay.
I'm cheap.
Oh, this is great. And I've done, like, I don't know, 10, 15 interviews, and like more and more I start to feel like, gosh darn it, I want to answer these myself.
Yeah. So I thought I'll give it a go. Why not?
Yeah, great.
So, well, the first one we kind of covered already, but favorite RPG not written by yourself?
Yeah, The One Ring for sure.
Yeah. Preference in RPG genre?
Of course, like many others, I like most genres, but if I'd have to pick one, I mean, I'm a fantasy guy. Tolkien was what got me into role-playing games, and Drakar and Demoner was the game we use for the big campaigns.
Yeah.
So fantasy would be my, like, if I had to choose one to only play that for the rest of my life, fantasy.
Okay. Music while role playing, yes or no?
Oh, I think you know the question to that one.
Nah.
And if I may just, I know they're quick fire questions, but since my guests are always giving long answers anyway, I think I can maybe, but it's funny because I created this back when DC++ and downloading was a big thing. I created a big playlist to have as background music, but then when we started playing The One Ring, we played a dwarven campaign. It was like a lot of conflicts between dwarven tribes was at the core of the campaign. Yeah, and a friend of the GM, or LM as it's called, lore master in The One Ring, asked me, like, do you have any like dwarven music? And I asked, well, do you want me to create dwarven music, or are you asking for tips for dwarven music? Yeah. And it was like, I was asking the latter, but if you want to do the first, sure, that's fine. Yeah. So I created, I think 5, maybe 6 tracks of like dwarven music. And that was the beginning of my like music creation for role-playing games. And I'm really happy that he asked me that question, because I'm not sure if I would have been here, composer of 4 or 5 OSTs for RPGs if he hadn't done that.
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
I'm really embarrassed when I look back at them now. I'm like, I need to chase that. But it's,
still, it's cool. It's a piece of history. Yeah.
So for sure, music.
Sorry. Music, absolutely. Okay. Snacks while playing, yes or no?
Yes, but if you're doing an actual play podcast, no crunchy stuff.
And no
buns
smacking in front of the
stuff like that. Yeah. Snacks are I've had a few sessions where we haven't had any snacks at all, and it's just felt so empty. Yeah, something's lacking. It doesn't matter much which snacks, just that there's something. I mean, you eat and drink while you play. That's that's what you do. I mean,
Yeah, I think it's
to
because
not do that.
it's a social gathering kind of, and you meet
Yeah.
with family, let's say for half a day. If nobody eats anything or drinks anything, it feels like we're forgetting something.
Yeah, and it's something with, I mean, everyone brings their own stuff, but everyone puts on a table, and it's like, this is for everyone.
Yeah,
I very seldom see people like, no, these are my snacks.
yeah, exactly.
These gummy bears are mine.
Yeah.
I mean, didn't you bring your own snacks?
Yeah.
People
And I have to say that we the one of the groups I play with, there's a few people with pretty severe food allergies, and that makes that kind of stuff real tricky. So I try to bring something that I can share, but I also say, look, this has gluten or whatever in it, so you're welcome to it. But
yeah, as long as it's not like nut allergy or something that the very air of nuts can,
no, thank goodness, no.
Yeah.
That's extra difficult. Yeah. Alcohol during sessions, yes or no?
Yes, but not too much. I've had some bad experiences in the past with some home games with players that have had too much to drink, and maybe, some bad situations, unfortunately. And some, like, what's it called? When you leave the table and when you storm out, what's it called?
It's like a real scene, kind of
making a scene out of it. Like, no, I'm leaving.
Yeah. Oh, that's terrible. Yeah,
you could cut me out of the group.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I remember going to live action role playing where they actually had a rule. They said, "Look, you can drink, but no drugs. That's for sure."
Yeah. And if you drink, you don't drink like heavy liquor. You have a few beers, sure, but no heavy liquor.
Yeah, because
but if
running around with a sword.
Yeah. And from Listen to Sweden rules that we always celebrate the last episode of a one shot or of a half campaign, half season or full season with having some drinks. We think that's kind of a nice tradition, but we seldom drink alcohol while we're recording because I mean,
it's kind of work.
People are listening to it. It's kind of disrespectful to them if we're not on the top of our game. But for the last, we're thinking that, okay, maybe the alcohol doesn't kick in until we're done with the episode, maybe. Sometimes that's not true, but... But in home games, for sure, I like to have some. And I also like to maybe, like, depending on what role, if I play Mutant... Maybe I want to drink some whiskey, or even better if someone has some moonshine or something. Fitting, And if it's fantasy, of course, ale out of a like tin mug or something, and stuff like that. If it's sci-fi, some blue wine or whatever.
Or that horrible blue milk from Star Wars. Oh my god.
Oh yeah.
All right, and the last quick fire question would be GM or PC?
I'm gonna copy many of my guests here and say I have a hard time seeing a future where I wouldn't be able to do one of them. But gun to my head, GM.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. And then traditionally, the last question I ask all of my guests is, who is your personal hero when it comes to role-playing games?
I've given this some thought, actually, and it's impossible basically for me not to say Fredrik Malmberg. He was a guy who really started this company, Äventyrsspel Target Games, who published Mutant, the first edition, and Drakar och Demoner, and they translated MERP, and they translated Chill, which was called Shock in Sweden, and they translated the Star Wars West End games, and there are a lot of heroes in the Swedish RPG scene, but none of them would be around if it were not from Fredrik. He was a guy who really made it into a company. He was a guy who went and lived with the big Chaosium guy. What's it called? Totally slips my mind now. He went to, I think he lived in Chicago, the guy who basically started Chaosium. And created the BRP system. The name just slips my mind right now. I feel so embarrassed. But he went there and lived with him for some time. And he brought back the BRP license to use for all their games. And there would be no. I mean, the Swedish RPG scene would be the same as in maybe Holland or France or Spain or Greece, if it were not for him. And that's a fact. That's a fact. I mean, the Mikael Börjesson would still bring this box to the first GothCon, and they would still play it.
Yeah.
But it would have stopped there. They would have individually imported Dungeons and Dragons and played that and played Traveller and games like that. But Fredrik Malmberg was a guy who really he's the one piece that I mean, if you pick out some of the other key players, yes, the Swedish RPG phenomenon would lessen. Yes, of course. Like Nisse Gulliksson or Anders Blixt or Erik Granström or a lot of the other people, Gunilla and Michael, who created the first Mutant. But if you take out Fredrik, you wouldn't have it. That's my personal opinion. That might not be true, but that's my personal opinion. And he's a guy who's now a Hollywood producer. His company, Paradox, they own the license for Conan. So they are doing the Conan movies. They are licensing out. And I mean, like Mutant Year Zero is only on license for the Free League to publish from Fredrik's company.
They don't own it.
No, they don't own it. No. Wow. And the same with the Drakar and Demoner license. That's not there. He still owns the license for that. Actually, the Drakar and Demoner, I think he actually sold. That's not a lie. I think he actually sold that. But I mean, and now they're making. I just found out today. There's a trailer out for a Mutant Year Zero movie.
Really?
Like a CGI movie.
Cool.
So, and I think they're basing it a lot on the computer game, the Road to Eden computer game. So it's just today found out that there's a trailer out for that, and it looks really awesome.
Cool. I'll try to find a link to put in the show notes. That's
so Fredrik Malmberg he's such a great guy, such like a humble guy, nice guy, great to talk to, and just an amazing guy, really, and very successful. But he totally deserves it because of all the hours he's put in. He's my biggest RPG hero. For sure.
That's an excellent answer. Yeah, somebody who really chased his dream and made it possible for a lot of Swedes to enjoy what's a wonderful hobby. Yeah,
for sure.
Excellent. Well, that brings us neatly to the end of the interview already. And all I can say is tack så mycket, which apparently means thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I don't know how to say you're welcome in Dutch, but
that's all the listeners are good. Okay, so if you're wearing earphones, people, to turn down the volume. So to say you're welcome in Dutch, you say graag gedaan.
Graag gedaan. Gedaan. Gedaan.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah.
Graag gedaan.
All right, thank you. Well, I don't know about you, but I have certainly learned a lot from this particular RPG hero. And some of the things that I found very interesting is, for instance, that a country's literary tradition has its effects on the types of RPGs that people tend to prefer, which I think is super interesting. And, if there's any of you out there that are currently thinking about what to do for a thesis when it comes to some sort of language or culture study, go and study this, man. I want to know. And also, there are so many Swedish RPGs that I've never actually heard of that sound super interesting to me. And also RPGs that I never realized are Swedish in origin. The other thing, less Swedish related and more RPG related, when teaching a new game, it is great to focus your players' attention on the fiction and just ask for dice rolls when they are needed. It's so easy to get trapped by the idea that you need to learn all the rules and the mechanics first and then kind of get into the game. Which, of course, is perfectly fine if that's what you prefer. Don't get me wrong. But I think this is a good way to kind of get going on a career of role-playing that is story-focused. And what's, just related to that one, there's more than one way to play any RPG. As long as you're having fun, you're doing it right. And I think the most, to me personally, the most powerful part of this interview was about the RPG hero of Andreas, which shows us that if you follow your passion, your dream, who knows what it could lead to, right? And I think that's a great piece to end on. Which means, if you remember correctly from the beginning, that I owe you a present. Well, here it is. I've had a chat with the CEO of Free League Games, and they said, well, it's nice that you're talking about Swedish RPGs and that you've reached a nice number of downloads. So you know what? For the next week, so from the 15th of September until the 22nd of September, you can get a 20% discount on Free League's web shop. And, they have a lot on offer, so go and check it out. If you're into, for instance, the Aliens RPG or their new 1800s kind of Nordic horror game called Vaesen, or however you say that. And, of course, there's Mutant Year Zero and for Forbidden Lands and Coriolis. Well, you can look at their website. Anyway, so if you're interested in getting your hands on some of this awesome Swedish RPG stuff from Free League, then here you go, 20% off if you listen to this within the week that it launched. And how to get this discount is you simply buy all your stuff and put in the discount code RPG Heroes. All right, there you go. Just literally RPG Heroes all together. Enjoy, and if you want, if you've bought something really nice, why don't you post a picture on Twitter and tag me in it and say, hey, thanks for the discount. That'd be fun. And mostly because I'm just curious what people buy. So enjoy. Well, that's it for episode 19. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed recording. If you did, please consider leaving a 5-star review on iTunes. It really helps to get the podcast get heard. Want to keep up with the latest news about my podcast? Well, hop on over to Twitter at RPGHeroes1. Check out the full show notes with all the links at rpgheroes.buzzsprout.com. Want to support the show and join other supporters on my Discord channel? Then I would be honored if you check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/rpgheroes. You can also buy RPG products with my affiliate code. Check the show notes for more info. 2 weeks from now, I'll be talking to the creator of Sweden's most dark and grim RPG yet, Mork Berg. Until next time, stay heroic.